Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the National Biodiversity Assessment 2025 webinar series. My name is Zinkitana Mengwana, and I'll be facilitating today's session. We are really excited to be kicking off a series with the first webinar, and we hope that you'll be able to join as for the sessions coming up for the next few weeks. I am going to start with a very brief background of what the NBA is, and then I will hand over to Shailene, who will take us through today's presentation. But before we start, I'm just going to say a few housekeeping points. The session is being recorded and it will be made available on Sunbeam's YouTube channel. Please keep your microphone muted to avoid background noise. And if you have any questions, you can pop them in the chat and we'll take them at the end. We are going to try to keep it to time. We can move to the first slide, Shailene. Okay, so the National Biodiversity Assessment is quite a complex process and it covers multiple aspects of biodiversity. At a high level, we look at three main things: ecosystem, species, and more recently, genetic diversity. On the ecosystem side, we assess all of South Africa's ecosystem types across land, freshwater systems like rivers and wetlands, estuaries where rivers meet the sea, and of course the marine environment. We also look specifically at the coastal zone, which brings all of these together and even includes sub-Antarctic territory. Um, which has some really important marine and island ecosystems. South Africa is actually the first country to assess all ecosystems across all three realms using the IUCN Red List of Ecosystem Framework, which is something we're really proud of. This work is highly collaborative. For example, Nelson Mandela University leads all the coastal work, and then CSIR leads the estuarine component. On the species side, South Africa has been doing red list assessments for over 40 years, so we're really strong in this space. In this NBA, we've assessed 15 taxonomic groups, including some new ones like freshwater crabs, fairy shrimps, and spiders. And again, this is done with a range of partners like the Endangered Wildlife Trust and BirdLife South Africa. Then lastly, genetic diversity. This is still quite new globally, but it's incredibly important because it underpins how species adapt and survive. South Africa is actually helping to lead the way in developing and testing indicators for this. We can move to the next slide. So, so all this work fits into a range of outputs. There's the main NBA reports, which you can download, but also something new this time is an interactive website. I think on the wrong slide. Can you move? Oh yeah, this is the correct slide. Sorry. So the main NBA report, we have the main NBA report, which you can download, but also something new this time is an interactive website with over 100 pages, including maps, data, and visuals. And what's really exciting is that this allows for more regular updates, moving us towards what we call a living national biodiversity assessment. You can move to the next slide. So just to give you a sense of the scale of the work, it is really a massive collaborative effort. The NBA involved over 490 contributors from around 110 institutions. So it's truly a product of the entire biodiversity sector in South Africa. So with that quick overview, I'm going to hand over to our main speaker for today to give us the real or the actual presentation. Shailene, you can take it on. You are muted.
Sorry, I was just introducing myself. I can't see my camera, so I don't know if you can see me. So I'm Shaylin. I'm one of the scientists behind the online version of the NBA, and I'll be the key speaker for this presentation on what the NBA tells us about the biodiversity, the state of biodiversity for South Africa. So the overview of the webinar today, we will be covering the headline findings from the NBA 2025 across realms, the key pressures and risks to South Africa's biodiversity, the NBA 2025 key messages, what's new in the NBA 2025, and also cover priority actions, knowledge gaps, and how you can get involved. So the NBA assessment reports on 4 headline indicators that describe the threat status and protection level of ecosystems and species. Threat status indicators use the IUCN Red List of Ecosystems and Red List of Threatened Species frameworks, which assess the risk of ecosystem collapse or species extinction across different realms and taxonomic groups where sufficient data are available. The protection level indicators measure how wild species and ecosystems are represented in South Africa's protected area network. These graphs provide a quick snapshot of the current status of biodiversity in South Africa, while more than half of species across most taxonomic groups are classified as least concern. The ecosystem results are more concerning, with nearly half of the 986 ecosystem types assessed in the NBA 2025 classified as threatened. The species groups assessed for protection level show some good results, with many of our species classified as well protected. Over 3/4 of ecosystem types are presented in the current protected area network, leaving about 24% in the not protected category. So the results from the NBA 2025 show that over 60% of South Africa's ecosystem types are now threatened, with aquatic and coastal ecosystems among the most severely affected. Wetlands, rivers, and estuaries are under particularly strong pressure due to altered freshwater flows, declining water quality, and resource use pressures, including fishing in estuarine systems. Since the NBA 2018, the overall picture has worsened, with coastal zones now classified as highly threatened. On land, updated invasive alien plant data and refinements to the National Vegetation Map have improved our understanding of ecosystem risk. In the marine realm, updated ecosystem maps and use of a broader set of assessment criteria have also slightly changed the results. However, overall the message is clear: ecosystem condition is declining and pressures on biodiversity are increasing. Although threats are increasing across all realms, the risk of ecosystem collapse is not evenly distributed. Ecosystem size and spatial distribution play an important role in determining resilience. Large ecosystems that occur across wide areas or in multiple independent patches are generally more resistant to pressures, as impacts in one location are less likely to affect the entire system. For example, the large Namakuru ecosystems tend to be less threatened, while many smaller fynbos ecosystem types face higher levels of risk. Similarly, offshore marine ecosystems are generally less threatened than inshore ecosystems, which experience more direct human pressure. So looking specifically at South Africa's biomes, the fynbos and grassland biomes are strongly affected by human pressures. More than half of the fynbos ecosystem types and around a third of grassland ecosystem types are classified as threatened, covering a substantial portion of their remaining natural habitat. The Indian Ocean coastal belt is currently the most threatened biome, with all ecosystem types facing some level of risk. In contrast, the Namakuru biome remains the least threatened, largely reflecting lower levels of land use pressure compared with other regions. Another important global indicator is the Red List Index of Ecosystems, which tracks real change in ecosystem threat status over time. The index ranges from 0, where all ecosystems have collapsed, to 1, where all ecosystems are classified as least concern, providing a clear measure of overall ecosystem health. South Africa, together with Colombia, is among the first countries to report on this indicator, and the approach has been highlighted in guidance under the UN Conservation on Biological Diversity. The results show a slow but constant decline in the status of terrestrial ecosystems over time. It is important to note that ecosystem change can be harder to detect than species decline. Natural variability, limited monitoring data, and the large size of many ecosystems can make trends more difficult to measure, particularly over short time periods. For example, the arid ecosystems such as deserts may look more stable because they are less affected by farming, even though they are not necessarily healthy. The ecosystem protection level indicator measures how well ecosystem types are represented within the protected area network. The figure on the left shows the percentage of ecosystem types in each protected category, while the figure on the right shows the percentage of natural ecosystem extent protected. Overall, about a quarter of ecosystem types are well protected, while another quarter remain not protected at all. The aquatic ecosystems, including rivers, wetlands, and estuaries, have the lowest level of protection, particularly because many of the pressures affecting them originate upstream and cannot be addressed by protected areas alone. Despite these gaps, there have also been important conservation success. South Africa has declared 20 new marine protected areas, protecting 83% of marine ecosystem types within just 5% of the mainland's exclusive economic zone. On land, protection has expanded through biodiversity stewardship programs, increasing the area under formal conservation. So by combining the threat status with protection level, we can identify ecosystem types that are both highly threatened and underprotected, which represent priority areas for conservation action. In the marine realm, about 17% of ecosystem types fall into the category, particularly along the west coast, the western Agulhas Bank shelf edge, and parts of the KwaZulu-Natal Bight. In terrestrial systems, roughly a quarter of ecosystem types are both highly threatened and underprotected, especially in the fynbos biome, Namakwa land, the interior grasslands, and the Indian Ocean coastal belt. The freshwater ecosystems show even greater concern, with over a third of river ecosystem types and about a third of wetland types in this high-risk category. For estuaries and coastal ecosystems, roughly one-third of ecosystem types are both threatened and underprotected. These patterns help guide where conservation efforts and protection expansion can have the greatest impact. So now we look at the species threats. Here we apply the International Union for Conservation of Nature Red List categories and criteria, the global standard used to assess the risk of species extinction. So the color scale shows the different categories. Green indicates least concern, while yellow through to red represents increasing levels of threat, and the darkest colors represent categories such as extinct in the wild. The larger circles represent the full taxonomic groups, while the smaller circles show South African endemic species within those groups. In the previous assessment in 2018, 12 taxonomic groups were evaluated. In the NBA 2025, this has expanded to 16 groups, significantly improving our coverage. A key improvement has been the inclusion of additional invertebrate groups, particularly freshwater and terrestrial invertebrates, which helps address a major knowledge gap identified in the previous assessment. The most threatened groups are freshwater fishes and cartilaginous fishes, including sharks, rays, and chimeras. Freshwater fish are particularly vulnerable because many species have very restricted ranges and nearly half of them are endemic to South Africa. This makes pressures such as invasive alien fishes especially challenging. For the cartilaginous fishes, 43% of species are threatened, including 6 of South Africa's 13 endemic shark species, placing full responsibility for their conservation on South Africa. As with ecosystems, we also examine long-term trends in species threat status. Some assessments date back to the early 1990s, allowing us to track changes over several decades. The results show a clear increase in the rate at which species are becoming more threatened, particularly since the previous assessment. This is visible in a steeper decline in groups such as mammals, plants, and reptiles, largely driven by habitat loss and climate change. Many plant species have recently been uplisted due to growing pressures in South Africa's arid western regions, while bird declines are strongly linked to habitat degradation and pollution affecting freshwater systems. At the lowest end of the graph are the groups closest to extinction. We again see freshwater fishes and sharks, confirming that these remain the most threatened taxonomic groups in the country. We can also examine species trends within different biomes. This analysis was conducted using a representative sample of 900 plant species. The results show particularly steep declines in the desert biome and succulent karoo. These patterns reflect a combination of pressures typically of arid regions, including climate change, illegal harvesting of plants, and increasing mining and renewable energy developments. Together, these pressures are driving rapid change in plant conservation status within these biomes. The Species Protection Level Index measures how well species are represented within South Africa's protected area network. Overall, protection levels appear relatively strong. Based on the sample assessed, about 70% of plant species are classified as well protected, while 77% of assessed vertebrate species, including mammals, reptiles, birds, amphibians, and freshwater fishes, fall into this category. However, freshwater fishes show lower protection levels largely because many threats originate upstream of protected areas such as water abstraction, pollution, and invasive species. It is also important to note that the picture changes when focusing only on threatened species. For these species, fewer than 30% of threatened amphibians, mammals, and plants are well protected. There are also encouraging examples of improvement. Several species, including birds, amphibians, mammals, reptiles, and freshwater fishes, have improved their protection status due to new protected areas and expanded conservation efforts. The good news is that the several species have improved in their protection level status. For example, this rare and range-restricted plant from Namaqualand has experienced a genuine improvement in protection level as a result of the declaration of new protected areas between 2018 and 2025. Similarly, several bird, amphibian, mammal, freshwater fish, and reptile species have improved in status. A detailed protection level analysis was conducted for plants using the representative sample of 900 species. Encouragingly, protection levels have improved overall, although 14% of plant species remain not protected, which is the second highest proportion after freshwater fishes. Comparing results between 2017 and 2024, protection levels improved for about 7% of species, while only 1% experienced a decline. These improvements reflect both the expansion of protected areas and better management effectiveness, meaning conservation areas are not only increasing in size, but also increasing in quality. Further details on the protection level analysis are available on the NBA website. Some species face a double challenge. They are both highly threatened and underprotected. These species require urgent and targeted recovery action. In response to the Kumin-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which calls on countries to halt species extinctions, South Africa has begun working with taxonomic experts to identify priority species for recovery programs. By combining species threat status with protection level, we can identify the species at greatest risk. Across all groups, 127 species fall into this high risk category, and about 80% of them are endemic to South Africa. Freshwater fishes and amphibians make up the largest proportion, while smaller but significant numbers occur among plants and mammals. This analysis helps focus conservation action where it is most urgently needed. Despite these challenges, there are also important conservation success stories. For example, the white-winged flufftail remains critically endangered due to the loss of its seasonal marshland habitat. However, its protection level has improved from not protected to poorly protected following the expansion of protected areas in Mpumalanga and KwaZulu-Natal. Another example is the Pickersgill's reed frog, where a biodiversity management plan has helped improve the species status, resulting in a downlisting from critically endangered to endangered. These examples demonstrate that targeted conservation actions can make a real difference. The MBA also looks at and includes 4 genetic indicators aligned with the Global Biodiversity Framework. 2 indicators focus on population level genetic health, including the effective population size threshold of 500 individuals and the proportion of populations maintained. While South Africa performs relatively well in maintaining population numbers, many populations remain too small to sustain long-term genetic diversity. Even species that appear stable, such as the southern white rhinoceros, can have poor genetic health with effective population size well below recommended thresholds. Importantly, these indicators also reveal genetic erosion in species that are not yet considered threatened, including some currently listed as least concern. The other 2 indicators measure evolutionary heritage, including the loss of phylogenetic diversity if threatened species were to disappear. For example, without conservation action, about 6.5% of amphibian evolutionary history and 5% of reptile evolutionary history could be lost within the next 50 years. Together, these indicators highlight hidden genetic vulnerabilities in biodiversity and reinforce the urgency of addressing them before they lead to irreversible losses. So to understand why biodiversity is declining, the NBA analyzed pressures using the International Union for Conservation of Nature Threats Classification Scheme, a global framework that categorizes drivers of biodiversity loss. The bubble chart summarizes results from thousands of threatened and near-threatened species assessments in South Africa. The size of each bubble shows the relative importance of each pressure across different realms. Several dominant pressure classes emerge, such as biological resource use, which is particularly significant in the marine realm, habitat loss and degradation, often linked to agriculture and land transformation, natural system modification, such as damming, water abstraction, and altered fire regimes, invasive alien species remain a major pressure across all the realms. And then finally, climate change, which is now being incorporated into the red list assessment using modeling approaches. So many of these pressures arise from important human activities that provide food, energy, and other resources. However, when these activities become unsustainable, they place increasing strain on ecosystems and species. For example, overfishing is a dominant pressure in marine and estuarine systems, while illegal harvesting is increasing across several realms, particularly for high-value species. Hydrological alteration, including damming, construction, and water abstraction, is one of the most damaging pressures for freshwater ecosystems because it disrupts flow patterns, sediment movement, and ecological connectivity. Pollution from mining, agriculture, industry, and urban wastewater further degrades water quality, contributing to growing threats for freshwater species and water-dependent birds. Then on-land habitat loss remains the primary driver of biodiversity decline, with agriculture, settlements, plantation forestry, and mining continuing to fragment natural ecosystems. At the same time, biological invasions are affecting all realms. Alien fish species disrupt river ecosystems, while invasive plants degrade wetlands, rivers, and mountain catchments. Across all of these pressures, climate change acts as a powerful amplifier, intensifying droughts, extreme weather events, and ecosystem stress. Together, these pressures create significant risks for South Africa's biodiversity. The greatest risks occur in freshwater, estuarine, and coastal ecosystems, which are relatively small in area but experience the highest concentration of human pressures. As a result, these ecosystems show the lowest ecological condition and the highest risk of collapse. Ecosystems with restricted geographic ranges are also particularly vulnerable. Small systems such as certain fynbos types, lowland vegetation communities, and small estuaries have limited resilience, meaning even moderate pressures can quickly push them into threatened categories. Climate change further intensifies these risks, with prolonged droughts already causing population declines in several species and extreme weather events placing additional pressure on coastal systems. Overall, the ecological condition of many freshwater ecosystems has deteriorated sharply. For example, about 18% of estuaries remain in natural or near natural condition, about 25% of rivers, and roughly 49% of wetlands. This widespread degradation significantly increases the risk of ecosystem collapse and species extinction if current pressures are not addressed. So moving on to the key messages. Now that we have looked at the indicators and main findings of the NBA, the next step is to translate the science into clear policy relevant messages. To do this, the NBA 2025 introduced a key message framework that groups the findings into three clusters. So cluster A focuses on the pressures affecting biodiversity and how these pressures also impact people and ecosystem services. And cluster B focuses on the status and trends of biodiversity, highlighting where progress has been made and where declines continue. Cluster C identifies cross-cutting actions needed to strengthen biodiversity, conservation, and sustainable use in South Africa. These messages are developed together with environmental managers, government officials, and policymakers, ensuring that the NBA findings directly inform decision-making. The first group of messages focus on the pressures affecting biodiversity and ecosystems and why reducing these pressures benefits both nature and people. Although biodiversity faces many challenges, ecosystems can also show remarkable resilience when effective management actions are implemented. There are several encouraging examples: improved fishery management, progress in controlling biological invasions, and advances in spatial planning have helped reduce pressures in some systems. However, major challenges remain, particularly climate change and the illegal harvesting and trade of species, both of which continue to threaten biodiversity. Then for cluster B, it focuses on the status and trends revealed by the NBA indicators. The results highlight both important conservation successes and areas of growing concern. Positive developments include the expansion of protected areas, progress in genetic monitoring, and new approaches to species recovery planning. At the same time, extinction risks for many species are increasing, and several ecosystems, especially aquatic systems, continue to show persistent negative trends. Understanding these patterns help identify where conservation actions are working and where additional effort is needed. The final group of messages focus on three broad actions needed to address biodiversity loss. First, addressing biodiversity challenges requires a whole of government and a whole of society approach. recognizing that biodiversity underpins many sectors of the economy and human well-being. Second, we need to strengthen biodiversity monitoring, building on tools such as citizen science programs and emerging technologies to improve data collection and tracking of trends. Third, new finance and business solutions for nature are essential. Moving beyond traditional funding models will be critical to scaling up conservation and supporting sustainable use of biodiversity. So what is new in the NBA? The NBA 2025 introduces several important advances compared with the previous assessment. One of the most significant changes is that the NBA is now fully accessible online, providing transparent and repeatable workflows for analysis. Several datasets and assessment methods have also been improved. For freshwater ecosystems, updated river condition data and progress in automated wetland condition assessments have strengthened national analysis. In the marine realm, the 2023 Marine Ecosystem Map has refined ecosystem classifications and improved marine assessments. On land, the new vegetation map of South Africa, released in 2025, has informed updated terrestrial ecosystem assessments alongside improved data on invasive alien plant distributions. The NBA also includes new analytical indicators such as one of the first national applications of the Red List Index of Ecosystems and the Ecosystem Protection Level Index to track conservation progress. Species assessments have expanded as well, with 3 additional taxonomic groups, which includes the freshwater crab, fairy shrimps, and spiders, and updated red list assessments for several vertebrate groups. Then finally, the NBA now pilots international indicators of genetic diversity and incorporates updated biodiversity tourism statistics from national economic data sources. Together, these advances make the NBA 2025 the most comprehensive and data-rich biodiversity assessment conducted for South Africa to date. Looking at the priority actions, the NBA 2025 identifies clear priority actions for addressing biodiversity loss while supporting people and the economy. First, biodiversity must be built into land and sea use planning so we avoid or minimize damage before it happens. Then we need stronger and better aligned policies, especially at local government level, supported by collaboration across sectors. South Africa already has good environmental laws, but enforcement and compliance capacity must be strengthened. Fourth, change happens on the ground through co-producted management plans, programs, and projects that support livelihoods and restoration. Fifth, innovation, technology, and good data systems, including AI, remote sensing, and citizen science, are essential to improve decision making. And then finally, all of this depends on sustainable and innovative financing, combining public, private, and blended finance approaches. And then we can look at the knowledge gaps and how you can get involved. So the MBA also highlights critical knowledge gaps. We still lack consistent long-term biodiversity data, strong evidence on which interventions work at scale, and clear links between finance and outcomes. But this is also where everyone can contribute. You can get involved by using and contributing to the NBA data and tools, partnering in monitoring, stewardship and implementation, and supporting innovative finance and capacity building to turn evidence into impact. I will now be handing over to Zimkita. Thank you all for listening.
Hello everyone, it's Carol Poole here. I'm the project manager for the NBA, and I'm going to take over from Zimkita, seeing as though there were some sound quality issues earlier. Very well done to Shaylin. I think she had the hardest job of our NBA webinar series, because that is a huge amount of information condensed into a very short presentation. So I hope you all appreciate it. That is the snapshot of NBA 2025. We do have a 10 webinar series coming up. This is number 1, and we will delve into each of these things in more detail. But for now, let's go to some questions. And of course, if you haven't yet explored the website, please go and do so. I've just popped the link in the chat. Shaylin was one of our crucial people, data scientists who built this website. This website was built in-house by Sanby people. It enables us to have control over the information that goes on the website. That also means there's possibly some mistakes. If you do find any mistakes on the website, under the contact us section, it does say, please let us know. There's an NBA website, email address, nba@sanby.org.za email address. Let us know if you find any problems on the website. All right. So please, we do have a couple of minutes, 10 minutes for some questions and answers. As I said, we will delve into detail in subsequent webinars, but if you've got any questions about headline indicators or things like that, now's your chance. I see there's one question in the chat already about accessing the spatial data for NBA 2025. And yes, we have many, many requests for the data. I don't know if Anisha or Mapali want to answer, or I see Andrew is actually in the room. I don't know if you want to take this one, Andrew. Mapali? I know Mapali is working hard to get all the spatial data online.
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, you're a bit soft.
Okay. I'll try. Yeah, so we are busy loading all the NBA data to Biodiversity Advisor with the help of Brenda and Fatani and Carol Lefakani, that is, and Anisha and Mapale can provide some support for those who can't wait. So use the NBA email address, we'll post it, and you can just make a request and we'll see what we can do to just share you something using Dropbox or Google Drive in the interim while we're busy loading everything to the proper institutional home. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. I'm just popping the NBA email address in the chat as well. Who's got any other questions about this content, this very detailed presentation that Shaylin gave? It was really the headlines of the NBA 2025 findings. Does anyone have any questions or comments, or wants Shaylin to go back to a particular slide? We can do that. We've got a few minutes before we'll wrap up. Anyone using NBA 2025 information already in your work? That would be another important thing to tell us. Yes, please come in. Porter, Jonay, so I think it's Jonay, if I'm pronouncing correctly.
Hi, it's Joan.
Joan, hi.
Just a question. I personally always love these documents because they summarize stuff and give details. So you can choose to look at what you need. Will there be any work on social media for broader distribution of infographics?
Interesting question, Joan. Thanks. So what we are using this webinar series as our primary way of trying to encourage people to delve into the detail of the website. And you're quite right. Like even previously we've had these large technical volumes, big PDFs, quite hard to delve into, and the website format really allows you to delve to the level you need. And we hope that the website's fairly self-explanatory of how to navigate it and all that. So thanks for the compliment about the detail and the summaries. There is, of course, the summary book as well. So Zamkita can post a link to the summary book in the chat. It's also available off the front page of the website. And we have been doing quite a lot on social media. There was a buzz sort of at the launch event in December. Possibly December was not the ideal time for a launch event, but it was the time that the Deputy Minister was available. And things died down over Christmas, which is why we wanted to sort of revive things now through this webinar series. Each of these webinar series have an associated sort of news item. Zimkita, you can post this one's news item in the chat as well, so people can go and look at that. And what we'll do is we actually have SANBI has a PR firm as well. So before each webinar, we're going to try and see if there's any interest from the media to try and write articles about that particular topic that's coming up. And then, of course, we'll make sure that the SANBI socials promote the recordings of these webinars on our other socials as well. So, but please go ahead. Everyone else can please, when you see something on the SANBI socials, like the recording to this webinar, please repost and like and do all that sort of thing. And if anyone has any ideas, Zimkita is our communication officer, so you can always drop her an email as well. I hope that answers your question, Joe.
Thank you very much.
Lovely. Right, I see we have another question in the chat. How or where was the data source to arrive at your assessment results? Right, now that, Louise, is an enormous question. Are you asking particularly for a particular ecosystem or a species group? Yeah, I don't know if you caught what Zimkita said earlier on in the meeting, that there were over 490 contributors to NBA 2025. The data sets are enormous and they come from all sorts of places and people. Okay, terrestrial. Right, anyone wanting to particularly answer that question from terrestrial data sets? Andrew, I'm going to hand back to you, if that's okay. I don't see Anisha in the room, sorry.
Sure, no problem. So what we've done on the website is at the bottom of every sort of results page, if you scroll down, you will see a repository, usually a Git repository, or you'll see some technical documentation that will describe the methods used to calculate the indicator. And in that methods, the input data will be described. Not all of this input data is, we are not able to share all of this input data because a lot of it belongs to other people. We're given permission to use it for producing that indicator, but we don't own it, so we can't distribute the data, but we would have a record of it and its source. So you could contact the data at its source. Those data sets that we can share, you can access via those repos. So those repositories will explain usually in the README of a repository, they will have a very clear list of input data and data sources, and where possible, they will post links to them if they're publicly available, or they will post the recommended citation, and then you would have to go and like dig around and find the scratching around, and you'll find, oh, this data set was sourced from this person, I need to get hold of them, or I need to visit this website to get it. So it's not, I'd say 100%, but it's way better than in previous years. And that's the whole point of the website, is the website allows you to delve deeper with a link, so that the website doesn't get cluttered with too much information. You get taken off to a Git repository or a technical report where the real nuts and bolts of the analysis are revealed. And in some cases, you'll be able to go and download some of the data. So what we are busy uploading is the results. These are the outputs of the NBA, and those are freely available. But the inputs, the data sets that we use to calculate the indicators, that's a little bit more, you need to get into conversations with the analysts involved to try and get to those source data. But the whole point is to try and make this reproducible and clear where the data sets came from. Thanks.
Oh, thanks, Andrew. And on that note, I just want to encourage everyone, I've popped it in the chat as well, the how to cite information is really, really crucial for NBA 2025. Previously, when you had these large, big technical volumes, you could cite that technical volume and say, oh, I got my, this information from the terrestrial volume. Now that it's website format, we're being very particular to ask you all to please cite the actual web page properly. We've got a recommended citation on most of all the technical web pages, and then there's a generic citation for the whole of NBA 2025 if the web page doesn't have a list of authors at the top. This really helps us to recognize the enormous number of contributions, whether it was data sets or people helping to compute, or people over the last sort of 5 or 6 years who've been just dealing on committees or whatever it takes to do the NBA. We just want to make sure that we recognize all the people involved by using the appropriate citations as needed. And again, if there's something that worries you about citations, email the NBA email address, and we can make sure that I can get that comes to me, that NBA email address, and we can make sure that I pass it on to the correct person. Okay, I see there's another question in the chat about the NBSAP, the new NBSAP timeframes. Yes, right now is my understanding. I think my understanding is that the latest NBSAP went through another round within SANBI earlier on this year, and it's gone to the department. Is anyone here from the NBSAP team that can maybe give more clarity? I don't see anyone from the SANBI NBSAP team. Andrew, do you know? Have you heard anything more lately?
So if Tammy, Sadiqa, or Ntaka were on the call, they could give you a definitive answer. But if they're not, then no. I believe it's had some internal comments, and we've got a deadline for internal comments from SANBI shortly. So it has not been released for public comment yet, but it's been backwards and forwards between SANBI and the Department of Environment and various government agencies in working groups. So each target of the NBSAP, the work has been broken up into like little working groups. So people have been commenting for months, but the sort of as a whole, the version of the NBSAP to be shared will be very soon. We'd say probably within the next month.
Great, thanks, Andrew. And just so everyone knows, like we really tried this time round to align the timing of the release of NBA 2025 with CBD requirements, Convention on Biological Diversity. Obviously, the 7th National Report was due now at the end of February. We did get that right, so at least we could use some of the NBA data for that, and of course the NBSAP cycle, and those sorts of things are really important, that we use the latest NBA findings for these kinds of things. Now that the NBA is a web-based format, we're hoping to be able to update certain things more regularly. So the NBA is hopefully no longer going to be a big, massive 7-year release timeframe. We'll tell you more about that in the final webinar of this series, but just to know that we are trying to, and it's not just the CBD, it's the other conventions such as Ramsar and other related things, SDG goals and things like that we need to try and align with. And what we will try and do is bring out updates when these other national reports are due. I think LZ's question has been answered in the chat, hopefully within the next 2 months or so. We are apologizing for sort of the delay in the release of the spatial data sets, and please do bear with us. Are there any other questions? I see Andrew's popped a note there that the NBSAP will be shared for public comment in the next 2 months. His estimate, not definitive, very far advanced. Are there new proposed terrestrial ecosystems for listing? Another very important question. And back to Andrew. So yes, they are. So NBA 2025 results do have different results. Andrew?
Yeah, so what the SANBI team are going to need to do is take the NBA results to the provinces as we did last time. And Tabisi Zamandi will hopefully help lead us on that. And the new results will go through the provinces and working group 1, MinTech, MinMec, and then hopefully result in a revised gazette. It is a bit of a tricky process. So we always end up with this period where the NBA has been released as the latest sort of science. So we encourage EIA practitioners, provinces to use the NBA 2025 as an additional source of information, but the legally gazetted list from 2022 remains in effect and in force until a new gazette is produced. But that doesn't stop you having extra information at your disposal for decision making. But yes, we do have a new list, and you can find that on the NBA terrestrial results page. The list is there, the data can be made available, but noting it is not yet gazetted. That's the process we have to do.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I hope that's clear for all the environmental assessment practitioners amongst us. Use the gazetted list, that's your legal requirement, but certainly use NBA 2025 results as an add-on. There's always unfortunate with this weird timing situation. Ideally, the Gazette should just refer to the latest NBA, but we don't quite have that right.
No, we never managed to adapt the
Act.
National Biodiversity Management Act to do that.
To do that. That would be the ideal situation. We're not quite that sophisticated in South Africa yet. All right, everyone, it's now 10 to 2. So if there are no more burning questions, I'm going to wrap up and just say thanks to everyone for attending. And I'm just going to quickly flash up on the screen our list of next webinars. Next week, Friday, is a deep dive into terrestrial. Then we'll have wetlands and rivers on the 24th of April, estuaries on the 8th of May, coastal ecosystems on the 15th of May, genetic diversity on the 22nd of May, marine on the 29th of May, the new species groups, so those 3 new groups that Shaylin mentioned, on the 5th of June, sort of uptake, mainstreaming, what is the NBA used for, on the 19th of June, which will be quite an interesting chat. And then we'll just close off with some feedback again on how we're trying to get the NBA as a more living assessment. I hope that suits everyone. I'm going to wrap up here. Thank you all very much for attending. Really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll sort out sound issues next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.